Hey everyone, welcome to Visual Modeling Concepts. In this lecture, we're going to talk about the basics of visual modeling and give you an understanding of what I mean when I say visual modeling and the benefits of using visual models within the analyzing requirements. So first off, what is visual modeling? Well, the actual definition is a graphical representation using a modeling language that takes something complex and makes it easier to understand. Overall, that definition is pretty complex or a little bit overly confusing, so let's go ahead and break that down. So the first thing is visual modeling is a graphical representation. Pictures are a lot easier to understand than a block of text. And so modeling, what it does is it takes that block of text and it breaks it up. It could break it up into full picture format. It could break it up into smaller words that kind of flow through in like a process flow. It could break it up into a matrix, which is basically like imagine an Excel spreadsheet with different cells and rows and columns. And so a graphical representation is a way to be able to display it rather than just displaying text. The next thing is using a modeling language. What we're going to talk about in the next lecture is the different modeling techniques that can be utilized. Well, over time, different languages have been created and evolved to meet different needs. And usually it comes from different professions or industries. And so the different languages are out there. We're not going to talk too much about the languages. We're not going to worry about that in this particular course because we're staying at a higher level. I just want to give you the concepts of what those different modeling languages are or what the different modeling techniques are. We're not going to dive into the specifics of the particular modeling languages. But the different graphical representations can use different modeling languages, and what it does is it takes something complex and makes it easier to understand. So it takes something that would be really long and convoluted if you wrote it out, but when you put it into a picture, into a model, a visual model, it kind of speaks for itself, and it helps to break that down and make it easier to understand. The example that I want to kind of share right now so you can start to picture it if you're not thinking about what a visual model is an organizational chart. Just about everybody's seen an org chart, which shows the different levels, and I'm talking about a hierarchical org chart where the president or CEO is at the top of the org chart, and you work through and say, okay, who reports up to that president or CEO, and you have that layer of executive management. And then under each executive manager, you have split off into a couple managers, maybe that are VPs or managers of departments, and that breaks down into your employees. Well, think about that org chart for a big corporation where it's got all these different layers and all these different departments and who all rolls up where. Well, now think about that org chart in a text form. Think that you had to explain that in text to say, so-and-so is the president, and so is the vice president reporting up to the president, and other vice presidents of these. It would take a long time to try to explain that in text, but a model of an organizational chart shows that very easily, and it's very intuitive as to what it shows. So that's just one example to kind of get you thinking about, okay, that's what a model is, and we'll go into a lot of different models and a lot of different techniques that are utilized. So what are the benefits of visual modeling? Well, we've talked about a few of them already. You can easily understand complex information. So it takes that complex information, that thing would take a lot of text, a lot of explaining, and it puts it in a way that makes it a lot easier. You also see this a lot, which isn't a model, but it's something that's done like that, is charts or graphs. It's taking complex information and putting it into a format that's easy to understand. So think about modeling that way as well. Another thing that's great about modeling is it gets stakeholders involved. So a lot of times these models are being driven as you're gathering requirements and as you're working through it. And this modeling can be done. You could be doing a process flow with sticky notes on a whiteboard as part of a elicitation technique. So you're getting your stakeholders engaged in creating this, as well as you're sending that to them for their approval and validation as well. So you're getting them involved in the different modeling techniques, where if you had explained it all in text, you probably would have to take that internally. Another thing is that you can receive requirements efficiently. It's a good way not only to explain requirements after the fact, but it's a good way to understand requirements up front. So instead of eliciting all of the details and just trying to write it all down in text, you're able to do, like I said, you can have post-it notes or something where you're kind of creating a process flow or creating a model right on a whiteboard, and it helps to make sure that you can elicit those requirements quicker. You're also able to identify the underlying problem. So with a modeling technique, you're able to understand pieces that you're missing, where it wouldn't have been as easy to understand that you are missing specific requirements or a specific flow if you wouldn't have modeled it out to be able to ask that question. Next, you can analyze what-if scenarios. So you're able to say, okay, we've got the model done, and now we can run through different what-if scenarios. What happens if this happens? And you can walk through your model to make sure that that's acceptable and that you've got a requirement that accounts for that. So you can just walk through different what-if scenarios. And finally, it helps you identify and remove irrelevant information. So a lot of times as you're working through and you're eliciting and analyzing requirements, you're getting a lot of details. And the modeling helps you just break it down to, okay, what's really important and what's kind of the fluff or the irrelevant details that can be removed from the particular requirements. So one thing I want to clarify right away is you're thinking, well, we just talked about requirements elicitation before. Now we're in requirements analyzing, analysis. Why are you talking about elicitation again? Well, you have to think about the phases aren't like hard set. You don't do elicitation and then do analysis and then do specification. You're trying to kind of work through it in those phases as much as you can, but you're going to do elicitation and then you're going to be doing analysis as part of those requirements, doing more elicitation. So don't think of the elicitation, analysis, and specification as completely separate waterfall phases or stages. Really think of it as kind of moving and molding phases that are able to be utilized as you need them. But I digress. I just want to make sure that was clear. And so those are the benefits of visual modeling. So what usually gets modeled? Well, there's usually two things that gets modeled. Number one is the current state, the as is. You'll hear that a lot. Let's document the as is processes. And that's how you're able to understand what is being done today. And that helps you to identify the problems or solutions to those particular processes, as well as it helps you identify what are the key pieces and steps to those processes, so then you can ensure that that's in the solution. And then finally, you're modeling the future state, so the to be process. And that's really saying, okay, how do we want this to work? And then what you do is you take that as is process and that to be process and you do what's called gap analysis. And you understand, what is it going to take for us to get from the as is to the to be? And a lot of that are your requirements that you're creating and that you're eliciting and documenting to be able to understand how you get there. So that's all about the visual modeling concepts. I hope that helps to get you a frame of reference and a base of understanding. In the further lectures, we'll go through some of the different modeling techniques that you can utilize.